The money-saving expert Martin Lewis has been fighting the good fight for those likely to be hit hardest by the cost of living crisis. Earlier this week, he begged the government to help people on lower income, saying he had almost run out of advice for households facing spiralling costs. And he's been on Sky News to say what he thinks of Sunak's announcements.
We are still standing on a personal finance precipice in the UK. The Chancellor is now the only person who can pull us back from that. And I don't think what we saw today is enough to do it. The best way to think of this is by October, based on current estimates, it's likely that a typical household's energy bills will be £1,300 higher than at the same point last October. There is nothing close in this budget to covering that amount of money. And we need to remember that energy bills are regressive. The richest don't pay that much more than the poorest. They're pretty much flat. It's almost a poll tax of energy bills. So that 1,300 quid hike is hitting everybody. And the poorest in society, when we remember that food prices and fuel prices and council tax and water bills and broadband and mobile phones are all going up as well, never mind that £1,300. The measures that we're seeing today, which even in the best case scenario, even if you couple it with the 150 quid council tax rebate the Chancellor announced a couple of months ago and the £200 loan not loan to help with energy he also announced, even at the top end is about 650 quid of help. Whereas on energy bills alone, you're talking a £1,300 rise. We are moving to many people on low incomes now to a heating the human, not heating the home situation, which is pretty hard to hear. And of course, insulation's great if you can afford it. Adding extra insulation.
What does that mean, heating the human, not heating the home? I'm just not clear.
Well, don't turn your central heating on. Sit in a sleeping bag. And this is not advice. This is the tangible situation people are putting themselves in. Whether you'll have to get an electric blanket to heat you and leave the house to be cold. That is a tactic I'm seeing many people talking about doing. They will heat the individual so that the whole house is cold, but you try and keep yourself warm within it. Stark, isn't it?
It is stark. Heating the human, not heating the home. So you can't afford to live in an environment where it's, we're not talking about like a really toasty house. We're talking about a place where it's reasonable to live and walk around and feel comfortable in. No, you're living in a room, a flat, a house, which is, too cold to feel comfortable in, freezing. And so you are heating just yourself personally in a sleeping bag, under a blanket. It's quite claustrophobic just to think about it, because obviously the moment you move around, the moment you leave your sleeping bag, you're going to be freezing, right? So it's on the spectrum, it's moving towards homelessness, isn't it? Your house can't provide what you need, so you have to stay in a sleeping bag yourself. Also really interesting the way he talks about this as like a poll tax. Obviously the poll tax is what was proposed by Margaret Thatcher to replace council tax. Incredibly, council tax is already quite regressive, but this was going to be even more regressive because every person would pay exactly the same amount of tax. Incredibly regressive. That was very, very politically unpopular, led to riots. One of the contributing factors to Margaret Thatcher standing down. And I think, Martin Lewis makes a very credible, sensible point to say that this is essentially like that because it's incredibly regressive. However much your household earns, you'll pay a very similar amount of money on your energy bill. So that's a huge proportion of someone on a low income and a very small proportion of someone on a high income. So it functions like a poll tax. And let's just hope that it has a similar political response to the poll tax. Are we going to see riots about energy bills? I mean, it would definitely be warranted, but Rishi Sunak's job, and Boris Johnson's job is to say, oh no, this doesn't actually have anything to do with us. It's because of Ukraine. It's because of global situations. Well, maybe your job is to protect people from those developments which are outside of their control. And you can quite easily protect people. You just have to make the political choice to do something like what Labour is saying, a windfall tax on energy companies, to properly subsidize people so that they can afford to heat their homes and they don't have to spend their days, under blankets and in sleeping bags. This is just as much a political choice as it was a political choice for Margaret Thatcher to try and introduce the poll tax. But we're going to have a government and government ministers who are saying, no, this is a natural disaster. And to be honest, there's just not that much we can do about it. I've been thinking, why are we hearing so much from Martin Lewis now and we haven't previously? And I have to say, maybe I just wasn't paying attention previously, but it does seem to me that his critiques are more ubiquitous of the government than they have ever been. And I think the reason is probably because of the nature of the injustice of government policies at the moment. And it comes down to arithmetic. You know, if you are talking about how have we not managed to have a green transition, if you're talking about why do we have low productivity in the economy, then talking to a money-saving expert, someone who is very good at talking about personal finances, you know, they're not necessarily going to give you the most insightful answers. That's not their specialism. But in this case, what we're seeing is simple arithmetic. You've got inflation of 8%. Prices are going up by 8%. For the poorest, it's going to be higher than that because they spend a bigger proportion of their incomes on food and energy, the things which are going up the most. Yet benefits are only going up 3%. If you work in the public sector, your wages will only be going up about 3%, right? And that's an arithmetic question. If prices are going up by at least 8%, and your income's only going up by 3%, then there's going to be a massive shortfall. You know, and you don't need to be, an economist with a PhD to work that out. You just need a basic grasp of numbers to the point that 8% is bigger than 3%, right? So you've got this shortfall, which is completely undeniable, which Rishi Sunak has not just, he hasn't come out and said explicitly, I know that I'm going to be making most British people poorer this year, but that's fine. No, he's sort of doing this odd sleight of hand where he is suggesting that actually he is helping people and he is improving people's incomes over this period of crisis. And all you need is someone like Martin Lewis to say, actually, he's not. The numbers do not add up here. The numbers that Martin Lewis is also, very rightly often highlighting is when it comes to energy bills. Energy bills are going to increase by £700 in April. By October, they're expected to rise again. So it could be that by October, they are £1,300 higher per year than they were last year. And yet the government is only giving people £350. £200 of that has to be paid back. And it has to be paid back from future bills when all the estimates suggest they are going to be even higher than they are now. So again, this isn't a question of political economy where you have to have a real deep grasp of how the economy works, how productivity works, how we could have a green transition. No, it's simple arithmetic. Bills are going up by lots more than the support to pay them is going up by. Your bills are going up, your wages aren't going up. Prices are going up 8%, wages are going up 3%. That means we're all getting poorer, and all you need to do to work that out is basic arithmetic. And I think that is why Martin Lewis has been so successful at cutting through essentially the government's bullshit on this, because there is no way that Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson can possibly suggest they are doing anything other than making poor people poorer. And in fact, I'm essentially making most of us poorer. The vast majority of the country are going to be poorer because of the relationship between inflation and how wages are failing to increase to that level, how benefits are failing to increase to that level, and support for public services, by the way, as well. So this is going to be, as Jonathan Portes said in those tweets I showed you earlier, this is going to be a real-term cut for basically all of our public services. So we've got a government which has been talking for months about how they'll do everything to support the NHS. Well, guess what? All of those increases they promised to the NHS now count for nothing because we've got 8% inflation. So either you're going to have to employ fewer doctors and nurses, or you're going to have to pay doctors and nurses less, which is unjust to begin with. These are the people who, kept us all going through the pandemic. Lots of them have PTSD, by the way. This pandemic was really, really hard. They said, to recognize all you've done for Britain, to recognize the hard work you've put in, we'll give you a 3% pay rise. Then within a few months, actually inflation's 8%, so it's a real terms cut. And, that's out of our control. There's nothing we can do about that. Sorry, we couldn't possibly increase your wages to meet inflation. So after having the two most difficult years of your life, we are going to give you a pay cut. But that's what the government is telling people who work for the NHS right now. That was all that clapping on the Thursday, we really appreciate these people. We're never going to forget how important NHS workers are to us. What do we do within a year? I don't want to say the pandemic ending, but within a year of sort of the height of the pandemic, we're giving them, a 5% pay cut. It should be much more of a political scandal than it is. I mean, we're seeing at the moment, because of the Ukraine crisis, people are looking at national security. Boris Johnson, his ratings are going up somewhat compared to Partygate. But this is what should bring his government down. It doesn't seem to be happening right now.